Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of a Man. Robert Bobby Donovan stood at 6'2", his steel-gray eyes reflecting a lifetime of calculated decisions. At 52, he had built an empire from nothing, a chain of luxury hotels that stretched across the eastern seaboard. His calloused hands told the story of a man who'd started swinging hammers at construction sites and ended up signing million-dollar deals in boardrooms. Bobby wasn't born into privilege. Raised in the South Boston projects by a single mother who worked 3 jobs, he learned early that the world owed him nothing. Every dollar earned, every connection made, every victory achieved came through relentless determination and an iron will that never bent, never broke, and never forgave. At 28, he'd met Linda Sullivan at a charity gala, a vibrant redhead with emerald eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. She was from old money, the kind that looked down on new wealth, but Bobby's raw ambition and unshakable confidence had drawn her in like a moth to flame. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a wedding that made the society pages, though Linda's family had made their disapproval clear. "You're marrying beneath yourself," her mother had whispered during the reception, loud enough for Bobby to hear. He'd smiled that cold smile that would become his trademark, filed the slight away in his memory, and continued building his fortune with laser focus. 24 years of marriage had produced 2 children, Ashley, now 22 and fresh out of Yale with a business degree, and Michael, 19 and studying abroad in London. Bobby had given them everything: the best schools, opportunities their mother's family could never afford, and most importantly, his own razor-sharp instincts for reading people. Ashley had inherited more than his dark hair and penetrating gaze. She possessed his ability to see through facades, to catalog every slight and betrayal, and to never forget who stood with her when it mattered. She was the child who'd worked summers at his construction sites instead of lounging at country clubs, who'd learned to spot weakness and exploit it with surgical precision. Michael, softer around the edges but equally intelligent, had always been Linda's favorite. Perhaps because he reminded her of her first love, a detail Bobby had discovered years ago but filed away for future use. The boy had his mother's trusting nature, a quality Bobby viewed as both blessing and curse. Linda had changed over the years. The woman who once marveled at Bobby's rise from poverty to prominence now seemed embarrassed by his blue-collar roots. She'd joined the right clubs, made the right friends, and slowly distanced herself from the man who'd given her everything she had. Bobby noticed everything. The way she'd correct his grammar at dinner parties, how she'd laugh just a little too hard at other men's jokes, the subtle ways she'd undermined him in social situations. But Bobby was patient. He'd built his empire by watching, waiting, and striking when the moment was perfect. He'd seen his wife's growing dissatisfaction, noted her increasingly frequent girls' trips and late-night phone calls. He'd observed the way she lit up around Victor Hayes, the silver-haired investment banker who'd become a regular at their social circle. Victor Hayes represented everything Linda thought she wanted: old money, Ivy League pedigree, and the kind of refined cruelty that passed for sophistication among the elite. He was married to Patricia, a mousy woman who'd inherited her family's pharmaceutical fortune and had 2 children of his own from his first marriage. Bobby had done his homework on Victor long before anything became obvious. The man was a predator who'd left a trail of broken marriages and shattered families in his wake. He specialized in targeting the wives of self-made men, feeding on their insecurities about their husbands' origins while positioning himself as the cultured alternative they deserved. As Linda's retirement dinner approached, she was leaving her position as director of the Children's Hospital Foundation, a role Bobby's donations had helped her secure. Bobby sensed the endgame approaching. The signs were all there. Her newfound confidence, the way she'd stopped asking his opinion on decisions, the subtle changes in her behavior that spoke of a woman preparing to make a dramatic move. What Linda didn't understand was that she was playing chess against a grandmaster who'd spent decades studying every move on the board. Bobby had built contingencies within contingencies, and when the inevitable betrayal came, he would be ready. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The Meridian Club's crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the assembled crowd of Boston's elite. Linda's retirement dinner had drawn nearly 200 guests, colleagues from the hospital, society friends, board members from various charities, and family. Bobby moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his charcoal suit impeccably tailored, playing the role of devoted husband to perfection. He'd spent weeks preparing for this evening, though not in the way Linda imagined. While she'd focused on her speech and guest list, Bobby had been orchestrating something far more complex. He'd positioned allies throughout the room, business partners who owed him favors, media contacts hungry for the right story, and carefully selected witnesses who would remember every detail of what was about to unfold. Ashley stood near the bar, stunning in a black cocktail dress, her dark eyes scanning the room with predatory awareness. She'd inherited her father's ability to read people, and tonight she was his reconnaissance team. Bobby caught her eye across the room and saw the subtle nod that confirmed what he already suspected. Victor Hayes was here, and he'd been whispering in corners all evening. "Quite the turnout," said Richard Kelly, Bobby's oldest friend and business partner. The two men had built their empire together, starting with a single apartment building renovation and growing into a hospitality conglomerate worth $800 million. Richard knew Bobby better than anyone, which meant he recognized the stillness that preceded the storm. "Linda always did know how to draw a crowd," Bobby replied, his voice betraying nothing. But Richard caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked every movement in the room. Patricia Hayes approached their group, her nervous energy palpable. She'd been drinking heavily, Bobby noted, and her usually perfect composure was beginning to crack. "Robert, wonderful event. Linda must be so pleased with the turnout." "She certainly seems to be enjoying herself," Bobby observed, watching his wife laugh at something Victor had whispered in her ear. The two stood too close, their body language screaming intimacy to anyone with eyes to see. Patricia's face tightened. "Victor's been looking forward to this evening all week. He has such respect for Linda's accomplishments." The word respect dripped with barely concealed venom. Bobby filed the interaction away. Patricia knew, which meant others would know soon enough. "Perfect." Dr. Margaret Foster, the hospital's chief administrator, approached with a warm smile. "Robert, we cannot thank you enough for your family's contributions over the years. The children's wing wouldn't exist without your generosity." "Linda's passion project," Bobby replied smoothly. "I just write the checks." It was a calculated humility, designed to highlight the contrast between his substance and others' style. As the evening progressed, Bobby watched the chess pieces move into position. Victor had been working the room, subtly undermining Bobby in conversations with key social figures. He'd overheard snippets, discussions about new money lacking refinement, and the importance of proper breeding. Classic Victor, planting seeds that would bloom into tomorrow's gossip. Michael called from London during the cocktail hour, his voice crackling through Bobby's phone. "Dad, sorry I couldn't make it. How's Mom handling retirement?" "She's handling it exactly as I expected she would," Bobby replied, the double meaning lost on his younger son. They spoke briefly about Michael's studies, but Bobby's attention remained fixed on the developing drama across the room. As dinner concluded and the speeches began, Bobby felt the familiar calm that preceded battle. He'd built his fortune by seeing around corners, by anticipating moves before his opponents even knew they were making them. Tonight would be no different. Linda took the podium, radiant in her emerald dress, the same color as her eyes, chosen, Bobby knew, because Victor had once told her it was his favorite. She launched into her prepared remarks about service and gratitude, but Bobby could see the anticipation building in her expression. This wasn't just a retirement speech, it was a declaration of independence. As she spoke about new chapters and authentic relationships, her eyes kept finding Victor in the crowd. Ashley moved closer to Bobby's table, her own instincts recognizing that something significant was about to happen. 24 years ago, I married a man who promised me the world, Linda continued, her voice gaining strength. And in many ways, he delivered. But I've learned that success isn't just about money or power. It's about connection, understanding, and sharing values with someone who truly sees you. The room had gone quiet, sensing the shift in tone. Bobby sat perfectly still, his expression unchanged, but Ashley could feel the coiled energy radiating from him like heat from a forge. Tonight, as I close one chapter of my life, I want to thank the people who've shown me what authentic love looks like. Linda's eyes found Victor again, lingering just a moment too long. The people who value depth over dollars, breeding over bluster. A few uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. Bobby's smile never wavered. So, I raise this glass to my real family. The people who've made me proud, who understand what it means to have class and character. She lifted her champagne flute, her gaze sweeping over Victor, his children from his first marriage who were present tonight, and conspicuously avoiding her own table. Bobby saw Ashley's hands clench into fists, saw the recognition dawning on faces throughout the room. The applause that followed was scattered and uncertain. Then Linda's eyes landed on Bobby, and her expression hardened into something he'd never seen before. Pure contempt mixed with triumphant cruelty. "You can leave," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Chapter 3. The Daughter's Stand. The silence that followed Linda's words was deafening. 200 of Boston's most influential people sat frozen, champagne glasses halfway to lips, napkins clutched in white-knuckled fists. The words hung in the air like a blade suspended over the entire social order they all knew and understood. Bobby rose slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. His face showed nothing. No anger, no hurt, no surprise. Just the cold calculation that had made him millions and would now make his enemies pay. As he stood, his steel gray eyes swept the room once, cataloging every face, every expression, every person who would witness what came next. But then Ashley stood too. At 22, Ashley Donovan commanded attention in any room. But tonight she was magnificent in her fury. Her dark hair caught the light as she turned to face her mother, and when she spoke, her voice carried the same authority that had built the Donovan empire. "No," she said simply, the word cutting through the silence like a gunshot. "He won't be leaving, but you will." Linda's triumphant expression faltered. "Ashley, sit down. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Ashley's voice never rose, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I understand that you just publicly humiliated the man who built everything you're standing on. The man whose money paid for your designer dress, your jewelry, this entire event." She gestured elegantly around the room, her movements controlled but predatory. "I understand that you just betrayed the man who saved you from being another trust fund failure living off Daddy's diminishing fortune." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Patricia Hayes had gone pale as death, recognizing the implications. Victor Hayes stepped forward, his politician smile firmly in place, but Ashley's gaze stopped him cold. "And I understand," Ashley continued, her eyes never leaving her mother's face, "that you think you're trading up. From the son of a construction worker to old Boston money. From new wealth to established bloodlines." Linda's face had gone white, then red. "Ashley Elizabeth Donovan, you will not speak to me this way. I will speak to you exactly the way you deserve to be spoken to." Ashley took a step forward, and Linda instinctively stepped back. "Tell me, Mother, when exactly did you decide that the man who gave you everything wasn't good enough anymore? Was it when Mr. Hayes started filling your head with stories about proper breeding? When he convinced you that Dad's success was somehow lesser because he earned it instead of inheriting it?" The crowd was riveted. This wasn't just family drama. This was a social earthquake that would reshape Boston's power structure. Cell phones appeared discreetly, recording what would become the most talked-about scandal in recent memory. "Your father," Linda began, but Ashley cut her off with a laugh that could have frozen blood. "My father built a fortune of $800 million from nothing. He employs over 3,000 people. He's donated $50 million to charities in this city alone. And you?" Ashley's smile was razor-sharp. "You ran a foundation that spent other people's money to throw parties for yourself." Bobby watched his daughter with something approaching awe. This wasn't planned. She was improvising, following instincts he'd trained into her since childhood. She was magnificent. Ashley turned to address the crowd directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, my mother seems to have forgotten where she came from. So let me remind everyone." Her voice carried effortlessly through the ballroom. "When my father met her, the Sullivan family fortune consisted of a mortgage-heavy house in Beacon Hill and mounting debts from her father's gambling addiction. Dad didn't just marry Mom. He saved her entire family from bankruptcy." The revelation hit the room like a bomb. The Sullivan family's financial troubles had been carefully hidden for decades, but Bobby had discovered the truth during their engagement and quietly paid off their debts as a wedding gift. "So when Mom talks about real family and authentic love," Ashley continued, Remember that she's talking about abandoning the man who rescued her family from ruin for someone who promises her a different kind of respectability. Linda found her voice again, shrill with desperation. You don't know what you're talking about. Your father, he's not. He doesn't understand. I understand perfectly. Bobby spoke for the first time since standing up. His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. I understand that you've been planning this humiliation for months. I understand that you thought you could destroy me in front of everyone who matters in this city. He stepped closer to his wife, and she shrank back. What you don't understand, Linda, is that you just declared war on someone who has never lost. Victor Hayes finally found his voice, stepping protectively near Linda. Now see here, Donovan. There's no need for threats. That wasn't a threat, Bobby replied calmly. That was a promise. Ashley turned her attention to Victor, and her smile could have cut glass. Mr. Hayes, how's your wife handling tonight's revelation? Patricia, are you enjoying watching your husband publicly claim my mother as his real family? Patricia Hayes had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now she stood on unsteady legs. The alcohol had loosened her tongue, and years of humiliation poured out in a voice thick with rage. Victor promised me he was done with his affairs. Promised me Linda was just a friend. She laughed bitterly. But I hired investigators 6 months ago. I know about the apartment he rented for your mother, Linda. I know about the trips to Martha's Vineyard. I know about the joint investment accounts. The bomb kept exploding. Linda's face went ash gray as Patricia continued. I also know about the prenup Victor insisted on before our marriage. He gets nothing if I divorce him for adultery. Nothing. Patricia's voice grew stronger with each word. But if I can prove financial misconduct, fraud, or criminal activity. She smiled with savage satisfaction. Well, that changes everything. Bobby filed that information away instantly. Financial misconduct. He'd wondered what Patricia's angle would be, and now he knew. She wasn't just a betrayed wife. She was a woman with resources and legal standing. Ashley seized the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've seen enough family bonding for one evening. Mother, I believe you said you wanted Dad to leave. She gestured toward the exit. The door works both ways. Linda looked around desperately, seeking allies in a room full of witnesses to her downfall. But Boston society was nothing if not practical. They'd just watched the Donovan family drama unfold, and everyone understood which side held the real power. This isn't over, Linda said finally, her voice shaking with rage and fear. Bobby's smile was colder than winter in Boston Harbor. You're absolutely right. It isn't. As Linda stormed toward the exit with Victor trailing behind her, Bobby placed a hand on Ashley's shoulder. His daughter had just chosen her side in a war that would reshape their family forever. Well done, he said quietly, and Ashley understood that she'd just passed a test she hadn't even known she was taking. The evening wasn't over, but the battle lines were now clearly drawn. Chapter 4, The War Room. 3 days after the retirement dinner, Bobby Donovan sat in his private office on the 42nd floor of the Donovan Tower, Boston's skyline spreading beneath him like a chessboard waiting for the next move. The mahogany desk that had once belonged to a railroad baron held neat stacks of documents, photographs, and legal papers, the ammunition for a war that Linda had started but would never finish. Richard Kelly occupied the leather chair across from the desk, a tumbler of bourbon in his hand despite the early hour. The story's everywhere, he said, sliding a tablet across the polished surface. Social media, gossip columns, even the business section. Hotel heiress humiliates husband seems to be the favorite headline. Bobby glanced at the screen without interest. He'd expected the media attention, had, in fact, orchestrated much of it through carefully placed contacts. Let them write their stories. It's just the opening move. Ashley entered the office carrying a laptop and a thick manila folder, her expression focused and predatory. She'd spent the last 72 hours working with the intensity of someone who'd inherited her father's relentless drive. I have the initial reconnaissance report, she announced, settling into the chair beside Richard. Financial position? Bobby asked. Weaker than they appear, Ashley replied, opening her laptop. Linda's been living beyond her means for the last 18 months. New wardrobe, expensive spa treatments, jewelry that she claimed were gifts from board members. The apartment Patricia mentioned, it's a 2-bedroom condo in Back Bay. Rent is $12,000 a month. lease signed by Victor, but payments coming from a shell company Linda set up using our family trust seed money. Bobby's expression didn't change, but Richard could see the cold calculation in his eyes. How much? $140,000 so far, plus furnishing and decoration costs. She's been funneling money through her foundation's discretionary spending account. That's embezzlement, Richard observed. Not technically, Ashley corrected. She has signatory authority on the family trust, and the foundation bylaws give her discretion over operational expenses. Legally gray, ethically black. Bobby leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. What else? Ashley's smile was sharp as a blade. Victor's more leveraged than he wants anyone to know. His investment portfolio took a major hit during the last market correction, and he's been borrowing against Patricia's pharmaceutical fortune to cover his positions. He needs Linda's connections and our family's social standing to rebuild his client base. And Patricia? Furious, humiliated, and ready for nuclear war. She contacted Morrison, Blake & Associates yesterday, the divorce firm that specializes in destroying cheating husbands. She's also been meeting with federal investigators. Bobby's eyebrows rose slightly. Federal? SEC investigation into Victor's investment practices. Apparently, our friend has been playing fast and loose with client funds. Patricia's pharmaceutical company has been one of his biggest accounts, and she's discovered some irregularities in how he's been managing their pension fund. The pieces were falling into place beautifully. Bobby had always believed that his enemies would ultimately destroy themselves. He just needed to provide the right pressure at the right moments. Richard set down his bourbon. So what's the play? Before Bobby could answer, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Donovan, you have a call from Michael in London. Bobby picked up the phone, putting it on speaker. How's your semester going, son? Michael's voice was tight with anxiety. Dad, I've been seeing the news stories. Is it true? Did she really do that? Your mother made her position very clear, Bobby replied carefully. She's chosen a different path. But, I don't understand. Why would she, after everything you've given us? Michael's voice trailed off, struggling with the reality of his parents' shattered marriage. Ashley leaned forward. Mike, she's been planning this for months. The retirement dinner was just her stage. Ashley, Jesus. Are you taking sides? I'm taking the side of truth, Ashley replied firmly. Dad built everything we have. Everything. Mom decided it wasn't enough, and she chose to humiliate him publicly instead of asking for a quiet divorce. There was a long pause. I need to come home, Michael said finally. Finish your semester, Bobby instructed. This will all be resolved by the time you graduate. After hanging up, Bobby turned his attention back to the war room. Phase 1 is complete. Linda has shown her true nature in front of everyone who matters. Phase 2 begins now. He opened the thick folder Ashley had brought, revealing photographs, bank statements, phone records, and other documentation that painted a comprehensive picture of the affair. Ashley, I want you to leak these financial irregularities to Patricia's divorce attorney. Not directly. Use intermediaries. Make it look like concerned parties are coming forward. What about the SEC investigation? Richard asked. We're going to help it along. Victor's been sloppy with his client accounts, and I happen to know several of those clients personally. They'll be very interested to learn about the risks to their portfolios. Ashley studied her father's face. That's not everything, is it? Bobby's smile was winter cold. Victor has been using his position on 3 different charity boards to funnel investment management fees back to his own firm. Illegal? Probably not. Ethically questionable enough to destroy his reputation? Absolutely. How do we prove it? We don't have to prove it. We just have to raise the questions. Once the investigations start, the truth will come out on its own. Richard poured himself another bourbon. And Linda? Linda made this personal when she chose public humiliation over private conversation. She wanted to destroy my reputation in front of Boston society. Bobby's voice took on an edge that made both Richard and Ashley lean forward. Now she gets to learn what happens when you declare war on someone who understands that reputation is everything. He pulled out another folder, this one containing detailed dossiers on Linda's social circle. Every charity board she sits on, every committee she chairs, every social event she organizes, they all depend on funding from my companies or my associates. She's about to discover that respect can't be bought, but it can definitely be withdrawn. Ashley's eyes lit up with understanding. Social exile. Complete and total. By the time I'm finished, Linda Sullivan. And yes, she'll be Sullivan again soon. Won't be able to get a table at McDonald's, let alone the country club. Bobby stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city he'd helped build. She thought she was trading up from new money to old money. What she didn't realize is that old money dies without new money to sustain it. And I control more new money in this city than anyone. Richard set down his glass with a sharp click. Jesus, Bobby, you're going to destroy them both. Bobby turned back to face his oldest friend and his daughter, his expression carved from granite. They destroyed themselves the moment they chose betrayal over honor. I'm just accelerating the consequences. Ashley closed her laptop with satisfaction. When do we start? We already have. The first domino fell 3 days ago at that retirement dinner. The rest will follow in perfect sequence. Bobby returned to his desk, pulling out a calendar marked with dates and notations. By Christmas, this will all be over. By New Year's, they'll both be gone from Boston entirely. And if they fight back? Richard asked. Bobby's laugh was colder than a North Atlantic winter. Let them try. They're fighting a war they don't even understand against an enemy they can't see coming. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be far too late to stop it. The war room fell silent as all three contemplated the systematic destruction that was about to unfold. Outside, Boston hummed with its usual energy, unaware that one of its most powerful families was about to reshape the social landscape forever. Chapter 5. The Squeeze begins. 2 weeks after the retirement dinner, the first cracks in Victor Hayes' carefully constructed world began to show. Bobby Donovan sat in his private box at Fenway Park, ostensibly watching the Red Sox battle the Yankees, but his real attention was focused on the text messages flowing across his phone like battlefield reports. Patricia Hayes filed for divorce this morning, Ashley reported, sliding into the seat beside him. She'd driven directly from the courthouse, where her carefully cultivated contacts in the clerk's office kept her informed of every significant legal filing in the city, citing adultery, financial misconduct, and irreconcilable differences. Bobby nodded without taking his eyes off the field. Assets. She's seeking half of everything, plus punitive damages for the affair. More importantly, she's demanding a forensic audit of all investment accounts he's managed in the last 5 years. Ashley's smile was predatory. Apparently, some of his clients have been asking uncomfortable questions about their portfolio performance. Below them, the Red Sox turned a double play, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Bobby allowed himself a small smile, not for the baseball, but for the elegant precision of watching plans come together. The SEC investigation? He asked. Expanding. 3 more clients have come forward with concerns about unauthorized trades. The pharmaceutical pension fund audit revealed some irregularities. Ashley consulted her notes. Victor's been borrowing against client accounts to cover his personal trading losses. Nothing overtly criminal, but enough to destroy his license and reputation. Richard Kelly climbed the stairs to their box, his face grim. It's worse than we thought. I just had lunch with Tom Morrison, Patricia's lead attorney. Victor's been running a Ponzi scheme, but small scale. He's been using new client deposits to pay returns to existing clients whose investments he lost through aggressive trading. Bobby finally turned away from the game. How much? $14 million in client funds unaccounted for. The regulatory investigation is becoming a criminal investigation. Ashley whistled softly. That's federal prison time if they can prove intent. They'll prove it, Bobby said with quiet certainty. Men like Victor always keep records. They can't help themselves. They need to document their cleverness, even when it's evidence of their crimes. A text message arrived on Bobby's phone, and his expression shifted to something approaching satisfaction. Linda's having problems of her own. The Children's Hospital Foundation board met this morning. Seems there are questions about her expense reports. What kind of questions? Richard asked. The kind that arise when a board treasurer discovers that $50,000 in operational expenses were actually payments to interior decorators for an apartment in Back Bay. Bobby pocketed his phone. Amazing how quickly these accounting irregularities come to light when people start looking closely. Ashley leaned forward. She'll claim it was Victor's idea, that she was manipulated. She can claim whatever she wants. The board cares about one thing: protecting the foundation's reputation. Linda Sullivan represents a liability they can't afford. Below them, The game entered the seventh inning, but the real action was happening in boardrooms and law offices across Boston. Bobby's phone buzzed with updates from across his network of allies and associates. Richard studied his oldest friend's face. "You're enjoying this." "I'm ensuring justice," Bobby corrected. "Linda chose to destroy my reputation publicly. She chose to humiliate me in front of everyone who matters in this city. She chose to side with a man who's been stealing from his clients to fund their affair." His voice remained calm, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. "These are consequences, not revenge." Ashley's phone rang, and she answered immediately. After a brief conversation, she hung up with obvious satisfaction. Dr. Margaret Foster, the hospital administrator. The Children's Foundation Board voted unanimously to request Linda's resignation. Effective immediately. On what grounds? Misuse of foundation resources, failure to disclose potential conflicts of interest, and conduct unbecoming a board member. Ashley grinned. Apparently, having an affair with a man who's under SEC investigation qualifies as a conflict of interest. Bobby's phone buzzed again. This time, his expression grew genuinely pleased. "Patricia Hayes is requesting a meeting. She wants to discuss mutual interests regarding her husband and my wife." "When?" Richard asked. "Tomorrow morning. Private dining room at the Union Club." Bobby stood, straightening his jacket. "Gentlemen and lady, Phase 2 is complete. Victor's professional reputation is in ruins, his finances are under investigation, and his marriage is headed for a very public and expensive divorce." "And Linda?" Ashley asked. "Linda is discovering that Boston society is a small, interconnected web. When you betray one of the spiders, the entire web turns against you." Bobby's smile was colder than December wind off Boston Harbor. "She's lost her position at the foundation, which means she's lost her social standing. Without social standing, she's lost her value to Victor. And without Victor's financial support, she's about to discover what life is like when the money runs out." They left Fenway as the Red Sox completed their victory, but Bobby was already thinking about tomorrow's meeting with Patricia Hayes. The enemy of his enemy was about to become a very useful ally. The drive back to Beacon Hill took them through neighborhoods where Bobby's influence was carved into the landscape: hotels, office buildings, apartment complexes that bore his architectural signature. This was his city, built through decades of careful relationship building and strategic thinking. "Dad," Ashley said as they pulled up to his townhouse, "what if Linda tries to come back? What if she realizes she's made a mistake and wants to reconcile?" Bobby turned to look at his daughter, seeing his own ruthless determination reflected in her dark eyes. "Ashley, I want you to understand something very clearly. I don't forgive betrayal. Ever. Your mother chose her side when she stood in front of 200 people and humiliated me. She chose Victor Hayes over the man who built everything she ever had." He stepped out of the car, then leaned down to the window. "Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Linda burned ours to ash 3 weeks ago. What happens to her now is entirely her own responsibility." As his daughter drove away, Bobby stood on the steps of his Beacon Hill townhouse, a property he'd bought and renovated when Linda had complained that their suburban mansion wasn't prestigious enough. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 24 years giving his wife everything she thought she wanted, only to discover that what she really wanted was to destroy him. Tomorrow's meeting with Patricia Hayes would open Phase 3 of his campaign. And by the time Phase 3 was complete, both Linda and Victor would understand exactly what it meant to declare war on Robert Donovan. The evening air carried the scent of autumn leaves and coming winter. Bobby breathed deeply and smiled. Justice, he reflected, was often indistinguishable from patience. Chapter 6. Unholy Alliances. The Union Club's private dining room had witnessed countless power meetings over its 150-year history, but few as coldly calculated as the one unfolding between Bobby Donovan and Patricia Hayes. She sat across from him at the polished mahogany table, her usual nervous energy replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. "I want to destroy him," Patricia said without preamble, her manicured fingers wrapped around a crystal water glass. "Completely. Financially, professionally, socially. I want Victor Hayes to lose everything he's ever valued." Bobby studied her with the same attention he'd once given to architectural blueprints, looking for structural weaknesses and load-bearing supports. Patricia Hayes had been a mouse for 20 years of marriage, but betrayal had transformed her into something predatory. Revenge is expensive, Bobby replied calmly, cutting his eggs Benedict with surgical precision. And dangerous. Are you prepared for the costs? My pharmaceutical company is worth $400 million, Patricia said flatly. My personal portfolio is worth another $60 million. I'm prepared to spend whatever it takes. I wasn't talking about money. Patricia's laugh was bitter as black coffee. You think I care about my reputation? Victor destroyed that 3 affairs ago. You think I care about social standing? I've been hiding his infidelities for 2 decades while pretending everything was perfect. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with 20 years of suppressed rage. He's stolen from me, lied to me, and humiliated me. Now he's going to pay. Bobby set down his fork and regarded her with new respect. A woman with resources, motivation, and nothing left to lose was the most dangerous ally he could have asked for. What did you have in mind? He asked. Patricia reached into her purse and withdrew a thick manila envelope. These are copies of all the financial documents my attorney's forensic accountant discovered. Victor's been skimming client accounts for 18 months to cover his trading losses. The total theft is closer to $22 million. Bobby examined the documents, his expression neutral but his mind racing. The evidence was damning: bank transfers, forged investment statements, falsified audit reports. Victor hadn't just been stealing, he'd been sophisticated about it. How many clients? Bobby asked. 17 major accounts, including my company's pension fund. 6 smaller individual accounts. The SEC investigation will become a federal prosecution within 60 days. And Linda's involvement. Patricia's smile could have cut diamond. That's where it gets interesting. Linda Sullivan didn't just benefit from Victor's theft, she actively participated in it. She slid another document across the table. Victor established a shell company called Heritage Investment Consulting 6 months ago. Linda is listed as the chief financial officer, with signatory authority on all accounts. The apartment in Back Bay, the trips to Martha's Vineyard, the jewelry, all of it paid for through Heritage, using stolen client funds. Bobby felt the cold satisfaction of seeing an enemy walk into a trap of their own making. She's not just an adulteress. She's an accomplice to federal crimes. $22 million in theft, wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. Linda Sullivan is looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Patricia's voice carried the satisfaction of a woman who'd finally found the weapon she needed. Unless, of course, she cooperates with prosecutors and testifies against Victor. The pieces clicked into place in Bobby's mind like tumblers in a lock. She'll flip on him to save herself. Almost certainly. Which means Victor loses his wife, his freedom, and his dignity. Patricia sipped her water delicately. But that's not enough for me. Bobby raised an eyebrow. What else did you have in mind? I want him to understand what it feels like to lose everything while watching someone else benefit from his destruction. Patricia's eyes glittered with malice. I want him to watch me rebuild the life he tried to destroy, using the very assets he thought he could steal. How? Patricia smiled, and Bobby realized he'd underestimated the depth of her transformation from victim to predator. I'm acquiring Victor's investment firm. Hostile takeover, using insider information about his criminal activities to drive down the stock price. I'll buy it for pennies on the dollar, then restructure it as a division of my pharmaceutical company. That's completely legal, Patricia finished. Aggressive, ruthless, and perfectly legal. Victor's clients will get their money back from me. His employees will keep their jobs, working for me. His office, his reputation, his entire professional identity will become part of my empire. Bobby leaned back in his chair, genuinely impressed. Patricia Hayes had just outlined a plan that would give her everything Victor had tried to steal while positioning her as the hero who saved his victims. There's one more thing, Patricia continued. I want Linda Sullivan prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want her to serve every day of her sentence in federal prison. And I want everyone in Boston to know that crossing Patricia Hayes comes with consequences. Bobby considered the proposal. Allying with Patricia would give him access to financial resources and legal firepower that could accelerate his own campaign against Linda and Victor. But it would also tie his reputation to a woman who was proving herself capable of industrial-scale vengeance. What do you need from me? He asked finally. Your connections in the federal prosecutor's office. Your influence with the media. Your ability to make sure that when this story breaks, it breaks exactly the way we want it to. Patricia's voice took on a harder edge. I want Linda Sullivan to be the face of this scandal. I want every newspaper, every TV station, every social media outlet to focus on the hotel heiress who threw away everything for a criminal affair. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Linda tried to access the family trust accounts this morning. All transfers blocked per your instructions. She's panicking. He showed the message to Patricia, who smiled with genuine pleasure. The net is closing. Faster than she realizes, Bobby agreed. Linda has been living beyond her means for months, counting on continued access to family money. Without that access, she can't maintain the lifestyle Victor promised her. How long before she breaks? Days, not weeks. Linda has never experienced real financial pressure. She's never had to choose between paying rent or buying groceries. She's never had to explain to friends why she can't afford the lifestyle they expect. Bobby's smile was predatory. She's about to get a very expensive education and consequences. Patricia raised her water glass in a mock toast. To justice. Bobby clinked his glass against hers. To accountability. As they concluded their meeting, Bobby felt the familiar satisfaction of watching a complex plan reach critical mass. Patricia Hayes had just provided him with the perfect weapon against Victor and Linda, federal prosecution that would destroy them both while positioning their victims as heroes. Phase 3 was now fully operational. Victor would face criminal charges that would end with federal prison. Linda would face a choice between betraying her lover or joining him behind bars. And Patricia Hayes would emerge from the wreckage as a powerful businesswoman who'd turned betrayal into triumph. Bobby Donovan walked out of the Union Club knowing that his enemies had sealed their own fate. Linda had wanted to humiliate him in front of Boston society. Instead, she'd given him the perfect opportunity to demonstrate what happened when someone declared war on a man who never forgot and never forgave. The winter wind cut through the streets of Boston as Bobby stepped into his waiting car. By Christmas, Linda and Victor would be facing federal indictments. By New Year's, they'd be gone from his life forever. Some lessons, he reflected, were only learned the hard way. Chapter 7. The Walls Close In. The headlines hit Boston like a meteor strike. Federal agents raid investment firm dominated the front page of every newspaper, while television news led with dramatic footage of FBI agents carrying boxes from Victor Hayes' downtown office building. By noon, the story had exploded across social media, transforming a local scandal into national news. Bobby Donovan watched the coverage from his office, Ashley at his side with a laptop tracking the story's viral spread. The timing was perfect, exactly 6 weeks after Linda's public humiliation and 3 days before Thanksgiving. The federal prosecutors had moved with the precision of a Swiss watch, thanks to Patricia Hayes' cooperation and Bobby's behind-the-scenes influence. The warrant covered everything, Ashley reported, reading from multiple news sources simultaneously. Personal computers, financial records, client files, and safety deposit boxes. They even seized Victor's personal assets, cars, boats, jewelry. Bobby's phone rang. Richard Kelly's voice was tight with excitement. Are you watching the news? Every channel, Bobby replied. What's the word from your contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office? Sealed indictments for Victor Hayes and Linda Sullivan. 23 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. They're looking at 20 to 30 years if convicted. Ashley looked up from her laptop. Linda's arrested? This morning, Richard continued. Federal agents found her at Victor's apartment. Apparently, she'd been staying there since you froze the family accounts 2 weeks ago. The irony was exquisite. Linda had moved in with Victor thinking she was trading up to a more secure future, only to discover that his financial empire was built on stolen money. Now she was facing federal prison because of her association with a man she'd thought represented security and respectability. What about Michael? Bobby asked. His younger son had been calling daily from London, trying to understand how his family had disintegrated so completely. I spoke to him this morning, Ashley replied. He's devastated, but he understands. Seeing Mom's mugshot on international news sites was apparently the final wake-up call. Bobby walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over a city where his influence had just reshaped the landscape of power and consequence. Below, afternoon traffic moved through streets lined with buildings he'd developed, hotels he'd built, and landmarks he'd helped preserve. This was his Boston, and Linda had tried to destroy his place in it. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Hayes. Justice served. Thank you for your partnership. VH in federal custody, no bail. LS cooperation negotiations begin tomorrow. Ashley read the message over his shoulder. She's going to flip on him. Of course she is. Linda has never faced real consequences for anything in her life. The prospect of 30 years in federal prison will make her very cooperative. Bobby turned back to face his daughter, which means Victor loses his only potential ally and gains the testimony that will convict him. And Linda? Bobby's expression hardened. Linda will serve reduced time in exchange for her testimony. 5 to 7 years, probably. Long enough to understand exactly what she threw away when she chose betrayal over loyalty. The afternoon brought a parade of calls from reporters, social media contacts, and business associates. The story had every element that made for compelling news: wealth, betrayal, federal crimes, and a love triangle that had destroyed 3 families. Bobby handled each interview with calculated precision, expressing shock and disappointment while carefully avoiding any appearance of vindictiveness. "I'm heartbroken for my children," he told the Globe reporter. "They're learning that their mother chose to participate in crimes that hurt innocent families. No parent should have to watch their children process that kind of betrayal." By evening, the story had reached the network news. CNN led with Boston socialite arrested in investment fraud scheme, while Fox News focused on federal raids uncover million-dollar theft ring. Each report included footage of Linda being led away in handcuffs, her carefully maintained image destroyed in a single morning. Ashley closed her laptop with satisfaction. The social media response is brutal. Hashtag Linda Sullivan is trending, and it's not sympathetic. Her charity work is being re-examined. Her foundation activities are under scrutiny, and everyone's wondering how much she knew about Victor's crimes. Everything, Bobby said simply. She knew everything because she participated in everything. Linda Sullivan wasn't an innocent victim of a charming sociopath. She was a willing partner in federal crimes. Richard arrived at the office carrying a bottle of 25-year-old bourbon and 3 glasses. "I thought this called for a toast," he said, pouring generous measures for each of them. "To what?" Ashley asked. "To justice," Bobby replied, raising his glass. "To the principle that actions have consequences, and betrayal has a price." They drank in silence, contemplating the systematic destruction of 2 people who had tried to destroy Bobby's reputation and steal his dignity. The campaign had taken 6 weeks from conception to completion, moving with the inevitability of a glacier but the precision of a surgeon's blade. "What happens now?" Richard asked. "Now we watch the trial," Bobby replied. "We watch Linda testify against the man she thought she loved. We watch Victor discover what happens when you build your life on other people's money. And we watch Boston society learn that some betrayals come with consequences that last for decades." Ashley poured herself another small measure of bourbon. "Do you think she'll try to contact you? Ask for help or forgiveness?" Bobby's laugh was colder than Boston Harbor in January. "I'm sure she will. Linda still believes the world revolves around her wants and needs. She'll probably write letters from prison, explaining how Victor manipulated her and how she's the real victim in this situation. And if she does, I'll return them unopened." Linda Sullivan made her choice when she stood in front of 200 people and told me to leave. She chose to humiliate me, to betray our marriage, and to participate in crimes that hurt innocent families. Bobby's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. Some choices can't be undone, some words can't be taken back, and some betrayals can't be forgiven. The office fell quiet as darkness settled over Boston. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, but inside the Donovan Tower, 3 people contemplated the successful completion of a campaign that had remade the social landscape of an entire city. Bobby's phone rang one final time. Michael's voice was heavy with exhaustion and acceptance. "Dad, I saw the news. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not seeing who Mom really was." "You saw who you needed to see," Bobby replied gently. "Children should be allowed to love their parents without reservation. That's what childhood is for. What happens to our family now?" Bobby looked at Ashley, who was listening to the conversation with the intensity of someone learning important lessons about loyalty and consequence. "Our family consists of the people who choose loyalty over betrayal, who choose truth over convenience, and who understand that love means standing together when things get difficult. So, Ashley and me, Ashley and you, Bobby confirmed, and anyone else who proves they deserve a place in it. After hanging up, Bobby stood once more at his windows, looking out over the city he'd helped build. Linda Sullivan would spend the next 5 to 7 years in federal prison, thinking about the choice she'd made and the life she'd destroyed. Victor Hayes would spend the next 20 to 30 years behind bars, understanding that stealing from your clients to fund an affair was the kind of mistake that ended everything. And Bobby Donovan would continue building his empire, secure in the knowledge that in Boston, his word was still law and his enemies still learned, eventually, not to test his resolve. Justice, he thought, was often indistinguishable from patience. And he'd always been a very patient man. Chapter 8. The Trial of Truths. 8 months after the retirement dinner that started it all, Bobby Donovan sat in the front row of federal district court, watching his wife of 24 years take the witness stand against her former lover. Linda wore an orange jumpsuit that drained all color from her face, her once perfect hair now styled by prison barbers, her manicured nails replaced by unpolished stubs. The transformation was complete. The woman who had once commanded Boston society from her perch atop charity boards and country club committees now looked like exactly what she was, a federal prisoner hoping to reduce her sentence by destroying the man she'd claimed to love. Ashley sat beside her father, taking notes on every word of testimony. Michael had flown in from London, his face a mask of complicated emotions as he watched his mother catalog Victor Hayes' crimes in methodical detail. The defendant told me that client funds were available for personal use as long as we replaced them before the quarterly audits, Linda testified, her voice barely above a whisper. He said it was standard practice in the investment industry. Victor Hayes sat at the defendant's table, his silver hair now completely white, his expensive suits replaced by an orange jumpsuit identical to Linda's. 8 months in federal custody had aged him 20 years, and his once commanding presence had withered into something hollow and desperate. "Did you believe that was true?" asked Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Collins, a sharp-eyed prosecutor who had built her career destroying white-collar criminals. I wanted to believe it," Linda replied. Victor was so confident, so assured. He made it sound like we were just borrowing money that belonged to us anyway. Bobby watched his wife lie under oath and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Linda was rewriting history to cast herself as a naive victim instead of an eager participant, but the evidence told a different story. Bank records, email exchanges, and witness testimony had already established her as a knowing co-conspirator who had spent stolen money with full awareness of its source. Patricia Hayes sat in the row behind Bobby, her presence a constant reminder of the alliance that had made this prosecution possible. She'd hired the best private investigators money could buy, provided crucial evidence to federal prosecutors, and testified the previous day about Victor's systematic theft from her pharmaceutical company's pension fund. "Mrs. Sullivan," the prosecutor continued, "did you personally sign checks drawn on Heritage Investment Consulting accounts?" "Yes," Linda admitted reluctantly. "And did you know that Heritage was funded entirely through transfers from client investment accounts managed by Mr. Hayes?" Linda's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. The answer was already part of the evidence. Linda had signed dozens of checks totaling over $400,000, all funded through Victor's theft of client money. "I signed what Victor told me to sign," Linda said finally, her voice breaking slightly. "I trusted him completely." Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Richard Kelly, who was monitoring news coverage from his office, CNN calling it the betrayal of betrayals. Linda's testimony is trending on social media as an example of how affair partners turn on each other when facing prison time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom. Linda had betrayed her husband for Victor, and now she was betraying Victor to save herself from the consequences of their shared crimes. It was a perfect demonstration of the character that had led her to this point, someone who would always sacrifice others to protect herself. During the lunch recess, Bobby found himself face-to-face with Linda for the first time since the retirement dinner. She approached him in the courthouse hallway, flanked by her federal public defender, her eyes red with tears. "Bobby, please," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need to talk to you." Bobby looked at her with the same expression he might give a stranger asking for directions, polite but completely disinterested. "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Miss Sullivan." The use of her maiden name hit Linda like a physical blow. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, leaving her with nothing but legal debts and the clothes in her prison cell. "I made a mistake," she continued desperately. "A terrible mistake. But I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you or the children." Bobby's lawyer, Thomas Morrison, Patricia's divorce attorney, who had become Bobby's counsel when their interests aligned, stepped between them. "My client has no comment," he said firmly. But Bobby held up a hand. "Actually, I do have something to say." He looked directly at Linda, his steel gray eyes showing no emotion whatsoever. "You chose this path when you stood in front of 200 people and told me to leave. You chose it when you participated in stealing millions of dollars from innocent families. You chose it when you valued Victor Hayes' attention more than your children's respect." Linda's tears came harder now. "Bobby, please. I know I hurt you, but—" "You didn't hurt me," Bobby interrupted quietly. "You revealed who you really are. The woman I thought I married wouldn't have been capable of what you've done. So either you've changed into someone I don't recognize, or I never knew you at all." He paused, studying her face with clinical detachment. "Either way, the Linda Sullivan I'm looking at now is a stranger who happens to share my children's DNA. Nothing more." Linda collapsed against the courthouse wall, her sobs echoing through the marble hallway. Federal marshals moved to escort her back to the defendant's area, but Bobby was already walking away, Ashley and Michael flanking him like bodyguards. "Dad?" Michael said quietly as they waited for the elevator. "Was that necessary?" Bobby looked at his younger son, seeing Linda's softer features reflected in the young man's face. "Michael, your mother just spent 3 hours on the witness stand describing how she helped steal $22 million from families who trusted Victor Hayes with their life savings. She's not asking for forgiveness. She's asking for rescue from consequences she earned. But she's still our mother." "No," Ashley said firmly. "She's the woman who gave birth to us. A mother protects her children, even when it costs her something. Linda Sullivan chose to protect herself at everyone else's expense." The elevator arrived, and they rode down in silence. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around microphones and cameras, broadcasting the day's testimony to a national audience fascinated by the spectacle of wealthy people destroying each other. Bobby gave a brief statement expressing satisfaction with the justice system's handling of the case, then escaped to his waiting car. The afternoon session would feature Victor's defense team attempting to shift blame to Linda and minimize his role in the conspiracy. It was a strategy doomed to fail. The evidence was too overwhelming, and Linda's cooperation had eliminated any possibility of reasonable doubt. That evening, Bobby sat in his Beacon Hill study, reading trial transcripts while Ashley worked on her laptop and Michael struggled with his own complicated emotions about their family's destruction. "The jury's going to convict him," Ashley said without looking up from her screen. Twitter sentiment analysis shows 89% negative reaction to his defense strategy. People see through the "Linda made me do it" narrative. "What about sentencing?" Michael asked. 20 to 25 years for Victor, Bobby replied. 5 to 7 for Linda, with supervised release and restitution requirements. Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Will you ever forgive her?" Bobby closed the transcript and looked at his younger son with the patience of a teacher explaining a difficult concept. "Michael, forgiveness requires repentance. Real repentance means accepting responsibility, making amends, and changing behavior. Your mother has done none of those things. But she testified against Victor. She testified against Victor to reduce her own sentence," Ashley corrected. "That's not repentance. That's negotiation." Bobby nodded. "If Linda had come to me privately, admitted her mistakes, ended the affair, and made real efforts to repair the damage she'd caused, we might have had a different conversation. Instead, she chose public humiliation, continued the criminal conspiracy, and only cooperated with prosecutors when facing 30 years in prison. So there's no chance." "There's no chance," Bobby said with finality. "Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Some choices reveal character in ways that can't be undone. Linda Sullivan showed me exactly who she really is, and that person isn't someone I can trust, respect, or love." Michael nodded slowly, finally understanding that his father's position wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about accepting reality and protecting himself from future betrayal. Outside, Boston settled into another winter night, but inside the Donovan family townhouse, three people contemplated the end of one family and the beginning of another. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments, and within days, a verdict that would send Victor Hayes to federal prison for the rest of his life and Linda Sullivan into a future she'd never imagined when she raised that glass at her retirement dinner. Justice, Bobby reflected, was often indistinguishable from inevitability. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months after the verdict, Victor Hayes sentenced to 28 years in federal prison, Linda Sullivan to 6 years with supervised release. Bobby Donovan stood in the boardroom of Donovan Enterprises, looking out over a Boston skyline that reflected his complete victory. The morning newspaper lay folded on the conference table, its headline reading, Hayes Investment Firm Assets Sold to Pharmaceutical Heiress. Patricia Hayes had completed her acquisition of Victor's former company, transforming herself from victim to victor in a single strategic move. She now controlled a combined enterprise worth over $600 million, while her ex-husband counted days in a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania. Ashley entered the boardroom carrying coffee and financial reports, her MBA from Wharton making her an increasingly valuable partner in expanding the family empire. At 23, she'd proven herself as ruthless and strategic as her father, but with a modern sensibility that opened doors he'd never considered. The London deal is finalized, she announced, spreading documents across the mahogany table. Michael's architecture firm will design our new hotel development in Mayfair. Estimated value, £400 million. Bobby smiled with genuine pride. Michael had channeled his grief over their family's destruction into academic excellence, graduating early from London Business School and launching his own architectural consultancy. His first commission, designing a luxury hotel for his father's company, would establish him as a major player in European development. He's calling it Donovan House London, Ashley continued. Traditional British design with modern American functionality. The drawings are beautiful. Richard Kelly knocked and entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who'd watched all his enemies destroy themselves. I thought we should celebrate. Forbes just released their annual rankings. Donovan Enterprises is now valued at $1.2 billion. Bobby accepted a glass of champagne but didn't drink immediately. Success meant nothing without someone to share it with, and he'd learned to measure victory not just in dollars, but in the strength of remaining relationships. Any word from federal prison? Richard asked. Linda writes letters, Ashley replied dismissively. Same theme every time. She's sorry, she was manipulated, she wants another chance. Dad returns them unopened. And Victor? Silence. His appeal was denied last month, and Patricia's divorce settlement cleaned out everything he had left. He'll die in federal prison, exactly as he deserves. Bobby finally sipped his champagne, savoring the taste of closure. 18 months had passed since Linda's retirement dinner, and the transformation was complete. His enemies were destroyed, his children had chosen loyalty over convenience, and his business empire was stronger than ever. There's something else, Ashley said, producing a thick envelope from her briefcase. Patricia Hayes asked me to give you this. Bobby opened the envelope to find a formal letter on Hayes' pharmaceutical letterhead. Robert, the final asset recovery is complete. Victor's victims have been fully compensated through the liquidation of his assets and insurance claims. Justice has been served, and healing can begin. Thank you for your partnership in ensuring accountability. With respect and gratitude, Patricia Hayes. Attached was a check for $50 million, Bobby's share of the asset recovery from Victor's criminal enterprise. Money that had been stolen was now being returned to benefit legitimate causes. She's endowing a business ethics program at Harvard, Ashley explained, named after the victims of investment fraud. She wants you to be a founding board member. Bobby considered the proposal. Patricia Hayes had proven herself a valuable ally and a formidable businesswoman. Working together on legitimate enterprises made strategic sense and would cement their victory over their former tormentors. Except, he decided, ethics education might prevent the next Victor Hayes from destroying innocent families. Richard raised his glass. To justice, accountability, and the power of consequences. To family, Ashley added, chosen by loyalty rather than biology. To the future, Bobby concluded, built on foundations that can't be shaken by betrayal or destroyed by weakness. They drank together, three people who'd survived a war that had reshaped Boston's social landscape and emerged stronger than before. Outside, the city hummed with afternoon energy, but inside the boardroom of Donovan Enterprises, a new chapter was beginning. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Michael in London. Dad, hotel design approved by city planning. Construction starts next month. Thank you for believing in me when everything fell apart. See you at Christmas. M. The message triggered a memory of Linda's retirement dinner, when she'd praised her real children, while dismissing the ones who'd actually earned her pride. The irony was perfect. Her biological children had proven themselves worthy of respect through loyalty and achievement, while her chosen family had revealed themselves as criminals and conspirators. Speaking of Christmas, Ashley said, consulting her calendar, Patricia invited us to her holiday party. It's become the social event of the season. Everyone wants to meet the woman who destroyed Victor Hayes and rebuilt his empire. Bobby nodded approvingly. Patricia's rise from victim to victor had inspired other wives of cheating husbands to take aggressive action against their tormentors. She'd become a symbol of female empowerment and strategic revenge, while maintaining perfect respectability. We'll attend, he decided. It's important to be seen supporting allies who share our values. Richard finished his champagne and stood to leave. Bobby, can I ask you something personal? Always. Do you ever regret how completely you destroyed them? Victor's in prison. Linda's reputation is ruined forever. Their lives are essentially over. Some people might call that excessive. Bobby considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Richard, they didn't just betray me personally. They stole from innocent families to fund their affair. They hurt people who trusted them with life savings and retirement funds. Linda chose to humiliate me publicly instead of asking for a divorce privately. Victor chose to steal millions instead of earning money honestly. He walked to the windows, looking out over the city he'd helped build. I didn't destroy them. I simply ensured they faced consequences for choices they made freely. They destroyed themselves through greed, betrayal, and criminal behavior. And if Linda was released tomorrow and asked for forgiveness? Bobby's expression didn't change. I'd wish her well in rebuilding her life somewhere else. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, some trust can't be restored, and some relationships can't be repaired. Linda Sullivan made her choice when she chose public humiliation over private dignity. Ashley gathered her documents, preparing to return to work. Dad, there's one more thing. I've been accepted to the Executive MBA program at London Business School. I want to work with Michael on the European expansion. Bobby felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with money or revenge. His children had chosen to build something together instead of tearing each other down. They'd chosen loyalty, achievement, and family unity over the betrayal and selfishness that had destroyed their mother. When do you start? January. Michael's found me an apartment near his office. We're calling ourselves Donovan International Development, separate from your company, but coordinated strategy. Bobby smiled, seeing the future taking shape in ways he'd never imagined during those dark days after Linda's betrayal. His children weren't just surviving their family's destruction. They were using it as motivation to build something better. You have my blessing and my backing, he said simply. Build something that will last for generations. As afternoon turned to evening and his children departed for their own plans, Bobby remained in his office, contemplating the view that had witnessed his complete victory over those who'd tried to destroy him. Linda Sullivan was serving year 2 of her federal sentence, learning daily that actions have consequences and betrayal has a price. Victor Hayes was discovering that stealing from clients to fund an affair was the kind of mistake that ended everything permanently. And Bobby Donovan continued building his empire, secure in the knowledge that in Boston, loyalty was rewarded, betrayal was punished, and some men never forgot the lessons others tried to teach them. Justice, he reflected one final time, was often indistinguishable from patience. And he'd always been a very patient man. The last light faded from Boston Harbor as Bobby Donovan prepared to go home to a family chosen by loyalty rather than biology, built on foundations that couldn't be shaken by betrayal or destroyed by weakness. Some endings were actually beginnings, and some victories were worth waiting for. The war was over. The righteous had won. Epilogue. 5 years later, Ashley and Michael's Donovan International Development had become Europe's premier luxury hotel design firm. Patricia Hayes served as CEO of a pharmaceutical empire worth over $1 billion and had remarried a British nobleman who appreciated her strength and business acumen. Victor Hayes died in federal prison during his 4th year of incarceration, having never received a single visitor or letter from anyone who had once claimed to love him. Linda Sullivan was released after serving 5.5 years, relocated to a small town in Oregon, and worked as a bookkeeper for a local charity, her request for contact with her former family continuing to be returned unopened, exactly as they deserved. Bobby Donovan's empire grew to encompass hotels across 3 continents, all bearing the family name and reputation for excellence that could never be tarnished by those who tried to destroy it. Some lessons, it turned out, were only learned the hard way, and some men never forgot who stood with them when it mattered most.